If you think getting promoted is about working harder, working longer hours, and just hoping someone notices, it's not. I got promoted after working at my company for just a year, and it had nothing to do with working myself into the ground. It came down to a few very specific, very strategic habits that helped make my impact visible and undeniable. So in this video, I'm breaking down exactly what I did and what actually matters in order to get yourself a promotion and help you progress in your career. If you don't ask, you don't get. That is the number one rule I try to live by. And it's through living by this rule that got me a promotion. If you want a promotion, you need to let your manager know that that's what you want. Because if they don't know you want a promotion, why would they promote you? If they think you're happy in the same role, with the same job title, on the same salary, they're not going to go out of their way to randomly promote you. And they're not going to go out of their way to give you a pay rise. So you need to make it clear that that's what you're aiming for. You need to have confidence in your abilities. You need to be audacious. You need to be confident enough to ask. And you need to be able to advocate for yourself. This means you need to bring it up in enough time so that it's on their radar before it gets to that promotion period. It also means that if you start having those conversations early, your manager is able to support you and help you get there. So that's exactly what I did. As soon as I knew I wanted to ask for a promotion, I spoke to my manager and I asked him what he could do in order to get me to where I wanted to get to. We talked about where I was at, what I would need to do in order to get to the next level, what gaps I needed to close, what projects I could work on that would help me get there. And we set out a plan. And this wasn't just a one-off conversation. This needs to be a continual conversation where you can keep reassessing your progress. So don't be put off if you're the one that has to keep bringing it up and has to keep following up the conversation, because naturally you're the person who's going to be most invested in your promotion. You're the one who's going to care the most about it because it's your career. So you can't just sit passively and expect someone else to do the work for you. You need to be the constant driver of this whole process. So just remember, if you don't ask, you don't get. Now, once you've started having these conversations, you'll have a much better idea and much greater clarity on what is required at the next level up. And once you know this, you need to start stepping into this role straight away. You need to start operating at this level above before you have the title. And some people might be really put off by this because they think I'm not doing that work until I get promoted. And I do understand that because it might feel as if you're doing extra work and putting in extra effort without the extra pay. But that's the wrong way to look at it, because companies don't promote based on potential, they promote based on proof. So you need to supply the evidence that you are capable of operating at that level above. They don't want to promote people and then later down the line find out that they have a lot of people who aren't qualified enough or who aren't ready to be in that position yet, because then it's too late and they can't roll back the promotion. Basically, no one wants to take on a financial or organizational risk by promoting you if they're not 100% confident that you can do the job. So if you can demonstrate that you're performing well, you're hitting your targets, you're taking ownership of projects, you're mentoring others, you're doing whatever you need to do in order to fulfill that next role, then you're making that decision easy for them. Now, could you do all of this and still not get promoted? Yes, that is a possibility, but that's why it's so important to do all of this work alongside that first point. You need to constantly have that communication with your manager and talk about your progress, talk about timelines, and keep following up and checking in on where you're at. One of the most practical things I did was keep what people refer to as a brag document. So this is essentially a document or a place where you can store all of your achievements, everything that you are able to brag about. So it could be anything you've improved within the company, any targets you've hit, any time you've gone above and beyond, any big project you've owned, or any leadership roles, anything you can think of that will support your promotion, and anything that demonstrates that you are operating at that level above. It should all go in that brag document. You need to be the one who's keeping the record of all of this, because again, you're the person who's going to have the most invested interest in your promotion. No one's going to care about it as much as you do. You may, of course, have a very supportive manager who is rooting for you and who's fighting for that promotion on your behalf. But even then, you can't expect them to do all of the work for you. They also won't remember everything you've done. They probably manage several people and have to keep track of their own work as well. So it's your responsibility to keep this brag document. And it's also for yourself in the sense that you might personally even forget what you've worked on. There may be so many things you've got to keep track of that it's difficult to remember exactly what you've done, exactly what role you've played in everything, and how much of an impact you've had. And even if you do remember, I can guarantee that your future self will be so thankful that you've kept this brag document along the way. It saves you so much time when it comes to that promotion period, because you don't have to kind of scrabble around or try and reach towards the back of your brain to remember what you've done. You have everything documented in this one place that you can just refer back to when the time comes. A brag document is also a great place to keep track of any feedback that you get. So reach out to people and ask them for feedback regularly. So anytime you've worked on something where other people have been involved, reach out to them and ask them to give you a couple lines of feedback. So I personally reached out to everyone I could think of. And if they were okay with it and I asked their permission, I would include this in my brag document to then send off for my promotion. And sometimes it can feel a little cringy or maybe a bit awkward. I personally felt a little awkward at the start asking for that feedback. But honestly, people don't care as much as you think they do. And more times than not, they're often happy to help out. So if you're just straight up with them and you let them know, hey, I'm aiming for a promotion, I'd really appreciate some of your feedback and I'd love to include it if that's okay with you. People are more willing than you think to help you out. And obviously there's a caveat that you have to have done good work and you have to have built a decent working relationship with them. But if you have done, and if you do all of those things, I don't see why they wouldn't help. So you should just ask, because again, if you don't ask, you don't get. And even if the feedback isn't super positive, it's still so valuable. You can choose what goes in your promotion pack and what doesn't. You can choose what to filter out. And if the feedback isn't the most positive feedback, you can still use it as a learning opportunity and you know what to improve on going forwards. Something you need to remember is that promotions are based on business impact, not necessarily just effort. So what I mean by this is you could be the hardest working person in your team, even in the whole company, and still not be considered for a promotion. Because if the work you're doing isn't the work that your company cares about, isn't the work that's driving sales or driving improvements or is going to reach company goals, they won't care and they're not going to be promoting you as quickly as the person who is doing all of those things. So you need to make it really clear why you're valuable to them. And this can be done by even just tweaking wording slightly or making sure you focus on the impact of your work. So instead of just saying, I refactored this piece of code, you need to explain everything behind that. So why did you refactor the code? What was the problem with it before? Was it slowing things down? So maybe you refactoring that piece of code improved processing times by, say, 40%. That can then translate into something that people can understand from a business point of view. Because reducing those slow processing times by 40% means that things can be more efficient. Maybe it means you have higher customer retention. Maybe it means increased customer sales. All of these things, you need to include all of that context within your work. And it's even better if you can get the real customer insight or the real data to back that up. So whatever it is that you're working on, it doesn't have to be customer facing or customer focused. It could be internal processes or internal ways of working. It could be to do with mentoring or upskilling colleagues. Anything that improves something within your company, you need to show that impact. Your company wants to know that the work you're doing is helping the business move forwards or helping the business earn more money. So you need to be able to frame your work in terms and language that they care about. And once you start doing this, it makes it so much easier to promote you. Now, your brag document is a private document for you to keep. It's where you personally keep a record of everything, and you don't need to show it to anyone at the start. You can later down the line show a version or maybe a refined version of it to your manager. But for now, it's purely for yourself. But as well as working on these things in private, you also need to work on your visibility within the workplace. So all of those great things that you're doing, you need other people to be aware of them. Not necessarily the details of everything you do day to day, but any big achievements you've done, you want to shout about them. If you don't talk about your work or actively show what you've been doing, people will miss it or they won't acknowledge it. And this is something I've had to learn because I'm not naturally the loudest person in the room, or especially working remote, I'm not the loudest person on Zoom meetings, or I don't naturally shout about everything that I do. But I've learned that I need to be good at communicating things I've done, and it doesn't necessarily mean I'm showing off or attention seeking. It just means I'm communicating all of the good things I've done in order to let other people know. And again, you don't have to be super attention seeking and let everyone and anyone know. You just need to communicate it effectively to the relevant people. So working on your visibility could look like you demoing different things you've done and worked on. It could be you sharing updates in different channels. It could be you presenting ideas or speaking up in discussions. Or maybe it's about running knowledge share sessions or helping upskill other people, being really vocal in these things and sharing with all the relevant people. If you have a chance to present your work, then make sure you take the opportunity. I used to hate doing this and I still sometimes get really nervous doing it. But I realized that if I wanted to get promoted, I needed to start doing these things and I needed to start putting myself forward for these things. So I started presenting my work. I ran workshops, I ran knowledge share sessions, and I made sure that I became more visible across my team and also the wider company. Even if you just start implementing one or two of these things, it will help improve how people see you. And something that comes with visibility is influence. The more visibility you build, the more your influence grows across the company. And when I say influence, I don't necessarily mean having loads of authority or being the biggest leader there is in that space. It's just about your voice and your opinions and the work that you do having some weight to it. It's about your thoughts being listened to and your opinion being valuable to other people. When promotion decisions are made, it's not just about can this person do the work, but it's also about can this person help build the team and help carry the team forwards. And demonstrating that you have influence is what is going to do this. If you're able to influence others, whether that's by advising or mentoring others, or whether it's just about you getting on with your work and having influence over other people in terms of inspiring them and others are learning from you, then that's when you can really demonstrate that you have impact and that you are valuable in this role. If you have other colleagues coming to you for advice and asking your opinion on things, then that's when people higher up know they can trust you. Your manager starts to trust you more, and this builds up through the rest of the organization. And you can start building influence by taking more ownership of work, by leading the way, mentoring others, and also by sharing your knowledge with those around you. Promotions and pay rises don't just come with time. They come with being deliberate and strategic about how you work and how you position yourself. If you start implementing even just one or two of these habits mentioned, you will start actively working your way up towards the next level. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to like and subscribe and share it with someone else you think might find it helpful too. I'll leave my links in the description box below so you can check that out, but thank you so much for watching. Hopefully see you next time.